Welcome back to Dinner for Her, a podcast about historical women with flavor. I'm your host, Mandy Walker, and each episode, my guest and I will have a conversation about a woman from the past they find inspiring. Then we will share a meal together themed around that woman's life. It could be her favorite dish, or one that played an important role in her life, or even just something central to her work or culture. For episode 6, I am pleased as punch to be breaking bread with my bright, funny, talented human being I happened to meet at what our honoree for this episode would tell you is a really crucial, busy point in her life, and that was her early childhood. Emily here, I thought you were 4 months old, but when I got here today, we are recording this at her mother, Kelly, my friend's house, and I thought Emily was about 4 months old when we first met, but Kelly let me know when I got here that she had just turned 1 year old. Her mom used to come into the restaurant that I worked in a lot because she had a husband that traveled, and she had 2 little minis that she needed to get out of the house. And with us both being hilarious, extremely short, incredibly opinionated young women, we were bound to be friends. I began babysitting Emily and her brother on the reg for several years at that point, and then later on, Emily returned the favor by babysitting my kids, and then on at least one occasion, having her firstborn baby babysat by those kids in return. So we got 3 generations of babysitting going on around here. Emily is now an accomplished, articulate, and, as I mentioned, extremely funny young mom of 2 herself. It's been an honor to watch her blossom into the promise everyone saw in that precocious, elfin-faced little girl. Emily, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you chose to honor Dr. Maria Montessori, a woman who could give our episode 5 guest of honor, Ida B. Wells Barnett, a run for her money in the race to live as broadly and accomplish more than any 100 regular human beings do in one lifetime?
Well, hi, I'm Emily Lunetta. I've known Mandy for as long as I can remember, to be honest. As mentioned, she babysat us, and then I babysat her kids, and so, we've known each other for a long time. And personally, I wear many hats. I just am a multitasker, and I do a lot of different things. I think this is partly why I was drawn to Montessori. As she was the same way. I'm a teacher, including being a Montessorian, a mom of 2, an artist, a poet, a believer in people, especially children. And I had some negative experiences in the public school system, traditional public school system, which I won't delve into too much, but those experiences were significant influences in my desire to transition to a Montessori school. I kind of felt like an outcast a lot in the traditional school system as a teacher, and even some as a kid,
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, just being different, kind of having different philosophy, I felt like.
Your mother and father both in a very conservative Tennessee, not rural Tennessee, I mean, we're in the suburbs, but they, even coming from rural Alabama themselves, I mean, they were both very educated, free-thinking people. So I absolutely can see that you all might have struggled because your parents raised you to be questioners. And that's not necessarily something that is often rewarded in the public school system.
Exactly. And, I found that this is kind of a common theme among Montessorians.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really fit the mold of the cookie cutter teacher,
Mm-hmm.
The teacher who's built to crank out test takers and workers and, not question,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I wanted to be a teacher since I was a child. I even, when I was doing my student teaching, it was at the elementary school that I went to, and my host teacher had some old yearbooks in the room from the prior teacher who was in that room, and there were 2 of them that I was in.
That's so cute.
And in one of them, they had asked everybody what they wanted to be when they grew up, and next to my picture it said, "Emily, I want to be a teacher when I grow up."
You probably don't remember this, but when my friend Leanne and I would babysit you when you were 3 or 4, you would make us play school. You would be the teacher.
It was my favorite.
Yeah.
I loved it. I always wanted to be a teacher. And then I was very disenchanted by the whole teaching experience kind of once I got into teaching traditional public school. And now I've fallen back in love with teaching through the Montessori method. I love that it enables me to support the whole child, encourage them to be scientists, artists, poets, mathematicians, or whatever their heart desires.
All of those things.
All of those things at the same time. They can also learn to wear many hats, right? And I also don't have to worry about leaving children behind as I push forward with lessons, because they're going at their own pace anyway, and I get to meet them where they are.
So the school you're in now is a Montessori school?
Yes, that'll be starting in August.
Oh, that's great.
So I just did a month-long teacher residency training on the Montessori method, where I stayed there in Memphis for a month, away from my family. You know, they got to come visit me, but it was hard, but it was really enlightening.
Very hard. Emily has a almost 11-year-old, and how old is Stella?
She's almost 18 months.
Yeah, little 18, just adorable kids, and
Yeah.
They're her world. We don't get to see each other in person much, but even just from social media, I can tell what a great mom you are, and how much that's central to your identity, and how much it means to you to be there for them. So my heart broke for you having to be away from.
It was really, really
especially
hard.
Stella. Not that Caden, but he's older and he had his dad, and I know
and he's established and he's okay. He can take care of himself.
Right. He can pick up a phone and call you.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas Stella thought I lived in the phone for a month. You know, she'd pick up my husband's phone and be like, "Hi, Mama."
Yeah.
Say hi, Mama.
And then you worry probably that she's gonna forget you, or
Yeah, it was really, really hard, and but I came out of it with a lot of really good foundations for the school year coming up.
That's great.
I really it was really hard, but I can't imagine doing it a different way.
Because you had to focus.
I mean, it kept being said that it was like drinking out of a fire hydrant, and it was, or a fire hose. But it really was. There was a lot of information all at the same time, but it was necessary. You know, I had a lot of imposter syndrome the whole time. Like, can I do this? Am I cut out for this? But by the end, I was like, I'm in this routine now, and now I'm like, oh, now we're done.
That's awesome.
And I miss all the people that I was with. They were great.
I'm glad it ended up being a good experience. And honestly, if anybody can grasp something like that in a month, it's you. So, so you absolutely were suffering from imposter syndrome.
Yes, and I made some really, really good friends, which was really nice, because it can be hard as a teacher sometimes when you feel different.
And you don't have community.
Yes, and community is so important to me, and that's a big tenet of the Montessori philosophy. And we went out and did things together and talked all the time and texted afterwards. You know, it was a really good experience.
And to know you're all going to be supported, and you're all pretty much on the same track as far as the method that you're going to have going forward. And we'll get into that later on.
Yeah.
One of the things I learned about her this week is how important it was that her method, not just that her method was taught, but that it was taught correctly.
Yes.
And how that got kind of out of control. But at any rate, before we get to that, do you want to tell us a little bit about Maria Montessori?
Yes. So Dr. Maria Montessori, she was born in 1870 in Chiaravalle. I don't know.
Chiaravalle.
Okay, there you go.
I heard it.
I don't speak Italian. I am Italian, but girl, I'm not the best at it.
I don't want to digress too much here, but my daughter dated a half Italian boy for 5 years. The boy did not know that Italian was an actual language.
Oh, bless him.
Yeah. And he was Italian.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so she was born in 1870 in Italy, and she was an Italian physician. She was an educator and a pioneer in child development, and her approach was revolutionary, her approach to education, and it continues to shape classrooms around the world today. She was one of the first female doctors in Italy, not the first, but one of the first, and she brought a scientific lens to education because of that, and she observed children with a really deep curiosity and respect. She believed that every child carries within them the potential to grow and learn independently when given the right environment and support. And that the prepared environment is a really big thing about Montessori education, is having that correct environment. And her method it's now known globally as the Montessori method. It emphasizes hands-on learning, self-direction, and respect for the child's natural development. And through her work, she became not only a trailblazer in education, but also a powerful advocate for peace, equity, and the empowerment of children.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we talked a lot in my training about like reading as a civil right.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. It's very fascinating stuff.
Yeah, well, the era that she was coming up in, there was, she lived through Mussolini's fascist takeover of Italy. And even before that, I mean, she actually came up when compulsory education first became a thing. And very likely the vast majority of Italy still wasn't sending, the rural parts still were not sending their children. I imagine it was much like the rural United States, where like in the 30s, my grandfather quit school in the 4th grade. And I think that probably was the norm, especially for girls, if they got any education at all. So her becoming a doctor was crazy. Yeah.
Yes, and her, I think it was even her parents did not approve.
Her father didn't. Yeah, her mother, as I learned through, again, the reading that we did this week, and
she was an educated woman.
She was an educated woman, and she actually was incredibly supportive. She was her biggest support. Now, how they felt about her actually going on to, I don't know that anyone has it on record how she felt, because one of the things I did discover is that even though she was relatively modern, and for a woman of her time, she was very documented, there's not a lot in the United States about her actual, like, current. A lot of my sources, like for instance, the last episode was about Ida B. Wells. I have a member for newspapers.com where you can go and you can just find a treasure trove of all of newspapers from around the world. Of course, if you don't read anything but English, that limits that. Right. But tons and tons and tons of articles about Ida, but the minutia of her daily life there's far less known. And it was the same with Maria. Like, there's so much of her as a human that we really just don't know.
Right, and there's so much of her, like, her talks that she would give at different places that was then put into, like, book format, speeches that she would give. But you're right, there's not a lot about, like a diary of her daily life, things like that. I know you had found something like that, but it
was basically a journal. And it was later in life, and it was really just some tenets that she wrote down about her philosophies on teaching. There's nothing like, I had a crush on Steve in 3rd grade, and that kind of stuff.
It's hard to find that info on her, or it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
But she was a very fascinating woman. She studied a lot of different things. She studied engineering, mathematics, biology, medicine, and philosophy. She did a lot of study in philosophy, and that was really rare for women of her time. Her background really shaped her methodical, observation-based approach. It was like the scientific method, She used that with her approach to education.
Honestly, one of the things that I thought, because I read that she had an uncle who was a fairly famous priest, who was a philosopher, I believe, maybe an engineer as well. Her father seemed to be a very educated man. Her mother was an educated woman of the time, which is incredibly... So I thought of you and your parents. Your parents are both very, very intelligent people. And I think that there was some genetics at play there as well. I feel like she probably was born very, very bright.
She was born ready.
Yeah. I think it took her a minute to... Yeah, same with Ida. That was one of the parallels I noticed about them, because what I was struck by doing Ida's episode was just, oh my gosh, was there one thing that woman did not accomplish? And with Maria, she had 3 or 4 different really high-powered careers in a lifetime where most people would have been happy to just have one of those distinctions. But she just kept going.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that her son wrote about her in his article about My Most Unforgettable Characters, what it's called. He wrote that as a little girl, my mother was the most backward pupil in her school, unable to get the lessons into her head. Then at 10, suddenly Maria changed, and she had a really heightened interest in religion, and she developed a sense of vocation. And it says that her parents first became aware of it, like her sense of vocation, when she was seriously ill with the flu. And the doctor had told them to be prepared for the worst. And Maria reassured her mother and said, "Don't worry, Mama Mia." She said, "I'm not going to die. I have too much to do."
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So she really knew that she was meant to do great things. And then she started coming first in her class. Her parents suggested that she would become a teacher, which at the time was the only career open
Right.
to women, right?
Right. You know, one of the things I want to say, though, is that I question that about how not bright she was before the age of 10. I don't believe that that's the case. I don't believe that the switch just turned on at 10. I think that she, much like you, struggled in that structured environment, but she had such a phenomenal brain and force of will that 10 is where she decided she was sick of this shit and she was going to achieve on her own terms.
And it's interesting because she talks about the different planes of development, which is where she has the groupings of the ages of children. And so the first plane of development is from birth until they're about 6 years old. And then you start to see them move into the second plane of development, and that's from, I think, 6 to 12. And then they kind of go on like that. And you see about halfway through the second plane of development, they kind of have this
light bulb.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is
So you
right
think
at
that's
that
what it
age.
was?
I think so.
So this is a good time, though. Why don't you tell us, can you summarize, do you think, what the Montessori method is?
Okay.
What made it different?
So the core principles of the Montessori method are there's respect for the child. So children are capable, they deserve autonomy. They should be able to make decisions on what their work is going to be, how they're going to not just stay busy, but that's why it's called work, right? Not just,
It gives it dignity.
Yes. The prepared environment is something that's a little different. It's a carefully designed space that supports independence and learning. And so it's like one thing that she describes is that a classroom should kind of be like a forest that you walk through. And, there's no like lanes, right? There's not just chairs in a row. They don't need space to just run. It's like there's different shelves and different areas of interest in the room. And there's also things like live plants that they take care of. And they have a sense of community and responsibility in that classroom.
I'm going to stop right here because I want to say something. I had a prejudice against Montessori because of what I thought it was for a long time. Because what I thought it was kids just get in the classroom and do whatever they want all day, and no one gives them any structure or discipline. And it's actually kind of the opposite of that.
Exactly. And it's and there's nothing in a lot of her stuff, there's nothing that says let them do whatever they want.
Right.
It's
because you want them to learn consequences.
They need to be working. So there's a distinction between just trying to look busy and actually doing work. And you can tell when you are an observant teacher. And that's a whole other thing, being the prepared adult in the room, right? You have to be the observant guide in the classroom and be able to look at these children and tell what they're doing and what it's doing for them educationally.
Right.
And that's another thing, is that's another core tenet, is that teachers are guides, not lecturers. Mm-hmm. And we observe, we watch, and see what's developmentally appropriate for them at that point in their plane of development, whatever sensitive period they're in. Which is a sensitive period it's a window of opportunity when children are especially ready to learn specific skills. And so each plane of development has its own kind of sensitivities. So for example, in the first plane of development, they're more prone to solo work, or they might work, side by side, someone working in parallel, whereas in the second plane, they're more working together.
So describe what that work would be in that first plane.
So in the first plane, they're doing things like there's sensorial stuff. Which that's kind of self-explanatory, like sensory things. And then there's also practical life is a really big thing. And that is where they're learning to pour from a pitcher. They're learning to cut things. They're learning to, they have like these frames with cloth on it where they'll learn to button and learn to zip and tie and things like that.
Working on the fine motor skills.
Yes, exactly. And they do start learning mathematics, reading, all those things early on. Even with Stella she's going into Montessori school in August, and they have very similar stuff in a toddler classroom to a primary classroom. which a toddler classroom is going to be 18 months to 3 years old. And then a toddler classroom is, it's like 4 to 6. And even in observing in the toddler classroom, they still have practical life. They still have sensorial sections. And then
practical life is like...
Practical life is the stuff that is the practical skills that they will need to have, such as the pouring.
Gotcha.
Carrying a tray carefully.
Like even the older kids, they help prepare their own lunches.
Yes, exactly. So in a primary classroom, they're going to be doing more than they would in a toddler classroom because it's scaffolded for their ages. You know, it's set up so that it's developmentally appropriate. But, you know, in a lower elementary classroom, which is the next after primary, lower elementary is 6 to 9. And like, that's what I'm going to be teaching. And they have a little more stuff that they do. There's not like a practical life section of the classroom because we kind of...
It's integrated more
a lot more. Like, there's classroom jobs that they have to do. So they have to take care of the classroom. Usually classrooms will have like a live animal a lot of the time if you can. And so a job would be somebody takes care of the animal for the week.
Or pets, or plants.
Or the live plants. It's very recommended to have live plants in the classroom, and many of them. But another thing that's important is freedom within limits.
Yeah.
So children choose their work, but it's with clear boundaries. You know, you can give a lesson, and you give a lesson to a small group. You're not typically doing a whole class lesson in most instances. You might at the beginning of the year if you've got a brand new class of kids who've never been in a Montessori school before. Like my school, we're starting a whole new school. So a lot of our stuff at the beginning might be whole lesson, more whole group lessons, but then you kind of peter that out and you do small group and then you give them follow-up work, but give them a choice. You know, for your follow-up work, you can write such and such in your journal, or you can work with these materials and then, you know, come back and tell me what you did.
I read something today about like the pink tower that is one of the ways that they learn math and division.
I'm not as familiar with that because I didn't learn the primary methods for math. I learned all the lower elementary stuff, which was, some of it was confusing to me even, but you know, it's a learning process.
Well, if you didn't grow up,
I did.
Our brains are all formed and hardened now. When new skills.
Yeah. So it's harder for us, and then the kids are just going to get it
right
like a snap. You know,
it makes total sense to me as I get older and have parented children of my own because one of my daughter Ava, who's incredibly bright, she got her bachelor's 6 months early. She's very driven. She's very type A. I wish that she had had a Montessori experience because she was somebody that came out wanting to determine things about herself. And she needed opportunities to feel that she had some control over things in her life.
Right, and having that autonomy is so important.
And she's taken she's decided that she might want to get her BA's in English, and she's decided she wants to get an education. She's taken the praxis test in the state of Tennessee, you can take a praxis test if you don't have an education degree and start teaching and then work on getting your certification. But she's had no education experience, and she also does very badly at standardized. Not very badly for her, because she's incredibly bright. She does not do well at a standardized test.
I understand that.
I do. For most standardized tests. Let me rephrase that. Like, I generally did well in standardized testing in school because it was nerdy things that I was interested in anyway. And it was like a game to me. But if it was anything that was outside of my realm of interest, like math, anything like that, it was like, Charlie Brown's teacher. I
was the exact same way when it was like reading, science,
right? The things I cared about.
Like, I loved that stuff, and then as soon as it was a math test, I was like, oh gosh, I'm not gonna be able to do this.
Yeah,
and I would get myself worked up, and I'm happy to talk to her about praxis if she needs.
Well,
advice,
she does, and we'll talk about that when we're done because she absolutely does need. I think what she needs is more. Again, the Montessori method, and it's the same with, I think all of us could benefit. I think this is normal for humans. If you are invested in something and interested in it and you understand the why of why it's important for you to learn it. Like, I learned so much better, for instance, podcasting. Emily's lovely husband Christopher helped us with teaching me a couple things I didn't know about my mic tonight, because of course I'm doing this all on my own. I'm not an engineer. I'm learning as I go, because one of the things I have learned at this age is that you will handicap yourself if you don't just jump in. Sometimes you have to do things badly until you can do them well.
Right, exactly.
And I think that's part of the Montessori method, is that, you
just try.
Right. And I learn better through trial and error than I do sitting down. As much as I love to read, sitting down and just reading dry, boring instruction is never going to help me learn something nearly as well as just jumping in and doing it.
Yeah, and that's one thing that's cool about the Montessori materials, is that they're like self-correcting. That's a term that's used a lot, where like the students, for example, like with a math material, it will not work the way that they want it to if they're doing the math problem wrong.
Right.
And they realize quickly, oh, I'm not doing this right, and they can
rather than having somebody standing over your head with a ruler, making you feel stupid and putting all of that pressure on you. You are determining that your choices. That's the part that I have fallen in love with her philosophy in learning about her, is that I am a firm believer that your choices. One of the problems with our world is that more people do not understand that your actions have consequences, and that is for the good and the bad, and that you matter. And I think a lot of the despair and hopelessness that we are experiencing in the world with a lot of different groups of people is because we are facing challenges, and we've frankly been brought up in the wealthiest civilization in history, and even the most fragile in our society are still experiencing a level of luxury and life, healthcare, things like that we have just we've started to take it for granted, to the extent that we now have people that deny science. Like they trust science to give them a computer that's 100 times more powerful than what got us to the moon in the palm of their hand, but they don't trust science to tell you, hey, take an inoculation if you don't want to die of this disease.
And that's part of why I love the Montessori method, is that it is science-backed.
Right.
This is methodically proven.
Right. She took the brain that allowed her to become one of the first women to get a medical degree, and then she applied that knowledge to, because I guess this is what I was trying to get at, is that what I loved is that her entire point in all of this was to make people understand that children are tiny humans. And just because the world has always been this way does not mean that it couldn't be better, and that it's through our actions and our thoughts and our deeds that the world can become. She was a very strong believer that the children can determine whether or not we have world peace. She truly believed that. And she wasn't this big freewheeling hippie that I always had, I always pictured Miss Lippy from, is it Happy Gilmore? The lady that had the makeup wrapped all over her face and, but she was not. She was a very...
She was a stern woman, and she even said, until children reach the point of normalization in the classroom, which normalization means the classroom is regulated. Everybody is doing their work as they should be. Everyone is calm. They're busy in a good way.
They're doing their work.
They're doing their work.
Which she thought play, at the very basic level, the youngest children, their play is their work. They're learning.
And that's why a lot of stuff is like materials are game-based and stuff. But until they reach that point of normalization, she said, do what you have to do.
Yeah.
Do what you have to do as a teacher.
Yeah. Yeah,
if you have to do a whole group lesson, do a whole group lesson.
Right.
If you have to do, you observe something in your classroom and you have to have a grace and courtesy lesson, which is a really big thing, grace and courtesy. You have to sit down with your whole class.
Basically discipline, teaching them consequences.
And teaching them manners.
Yeah.
And teaching them, I observed we're having a really hard time getting up quietly out of our seats and then making sure we push in our chairs. So I'm going to show you, everybody, I need to make sure I have all of your eyes,
Yeah.
And demonstrate those things to them. You can stop and be stern, but you don't have to be loud. You don't have to be imposing.
You don't have to disrespect their autonomy as a person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that piece you were talking about, like she did believe that education was key to creating a more peaceful world.
Yeah.
And it is.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Because again, I mean, that's what I have gotten older. I have become more idealistic in some ways. Not because I am this big freewheeling hippie. I'm the furthest thing from it. I just think it's common sense. I mean, we have seen that the world has gotten better in many ways over time. We are, I think, in many ways currently experiencing a trend backwards, but that just seems to be what the process of history is, because we humans are still animals, and we're prone to a lot of just environmental pressures and stressors and things like that most of us are not even aware of throughout our lives. But I have children, and I firmly believe that this world could be better for them if we got more people to understand that it's not hopeless until you just sit on your ass and do nothing.
Right.
That doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean you might not even live to see a better day.
Exactly. And she even said, a good quote from her is that she said, "The child is both a hope and a promise for mankind." Mm-hmm. And how you raise your children, a lot of what I learned through my training, it made me reflect a lot on how I've raised my son so far and how I'm going to be raising my daughter, and how you raise your children can be so heavily influenced by this Montessori method, even if you're not a teacher.
Yeah.
You know, and there was stuff like in the parent handbook that I got from Stella's school, there was stuff about like, here are things that you can do at home. Like, here's like how you can help support us at school best. And, you know, and I was like, I know all of this stuff, but
yeah.
But,
was there anything in there that you were like, we're not doing that?
No, I mean,
was it all very common sense? Easy?
Screen time is the one thing that is very hard for me to back away from. That's something in Montessori classrooms you will not see a screen. They're not working on computers. They're not working, you know, with an iPad or whatever. Some students may have assistive technology, but that's different when it's a
learning disability type of situation.
Exactly. Or if it's like their mode of communication, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
But you're not going to see kids on Chromebooks in a classroom.
Right.
You know, but like her school was like, in the paperwork, it was like, how much screen time does your child get a day? And I'm like, probably too much.
None of your business.
Honest, you know, she watches a lot of Miss Rachel and Bluey.
Yeah.
You know, but like, Mama's got to cook dinner.
Right. You got to get a shower sometime.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, there's some things there, and then, you know, it's like I'm not always going to be quiet and slow and like physically slow down, because sometimes you have to chase your child into
and you have another
lot.
child. Yeah.
But you do what you can, but there, you know, for the most part, it's like, this is all stuff that's kind of like a no-brainer. You know what I mean? Or it should be.
Yeah.
At least. You know, and it's just so fascinating to me that like there has to be so much science to back this up.
Yeah. I mean, she was asked to... Right. Well, you're right. And I agree. And that is something that... I didn't realize that I was doing the Montessori method. And I don't think it really technically... I'm sure there's a ton I could learn about how to actually do the Montessori method. But just as far as that philosophy of, you know, kids need to understand very early on that their actions matter for good or bad. That is how I raised my children. That's how I continue to raise my children.
They have natural consequences.
Right.
That's a really
I didn't
big thing.
save them from my kids were protected as they needed to be, but they were not wrapped in swaddling. Like I have, since I was 6 years old at least, I've had depression and anxiety. One of my big phobias was passing that on to my children, and I had to really work with and deal with that. And as a matter of fact, both my children have turned out to be pretty anxious. But I've also come to, at this point in my life, realize that that's just the condition of anybody that's intelligent in this world. Because as an animal, you can see the pitfalls, you can see but you can also see where it could be better. And that's where I think we fall down a lot with our kids, is that we forget that ourselves, because it becomes harder over time when you're dealing with bills and heartbreak and illness and losing people. it's very hard for adults to remember that the world can always be better. And so modeling that for your children sometimes gets lost, a lot of times gets lost. And so I had to, at any rate, and and there were things that happened when I was a kid that I never wanted to happen to my children and things, but I had to realize I can't wrap them. Like, it would have been much more dangerous for me to wrap them in swaddling and never let them have experiences and give them crippling fear of strangers and new experiences and things like that. I had to teach them to be good decision makers, because I needed them to, first of all, I also had seen throughout my family what happened with people who were raised with the because I said so. It didn't work. They rebelled, and a lot of them ended up with really bad lives. But, the ones that made just, for whatever reason, maybe were born with a little more sense or whatever and learned the consequences of our actions early on, it just made sense to me. Like, teach your children to, no one likes to be told because I said so. I hate that.
Oh, God, I hated that.
That doesn't mean it's not sometimes the answer.
I have said that to my son a couple times, and I'm like, oh my gosh,
But here's what I learned about that, is that they're with kids, sometimes they're just they already know the answer, and they're bored, and they're just going, it's a control. And at that point, we're done. But I always answered them at least once in an age-appropriate fashion, because I didn't want to tell them to stop asking questions. That's what's wrong with this freaking place.
I know.
Is people just forget to ask more questions. They forget to be curious about the world around them. They see a problem, and instead of thinking, how can we make that better, they start thinking, well, screw it, it all sucks now. But
there's so much hope in the world.
There's so much. It would have never gotten better.
If you look at the face of a child, like,
they're born.
There is so much hope. And even in my experience in the traditional public school, there's so many good eggs.
Yeah, more than bad.
More than not, yeah. And
some of them have come from terrible environments, and they still have hope, and
Yeah, and they're still like the bright, chipper kid in the classroom, and I know what's going on at home.
And they want to impress you. They want you to see that they can do things. And if you just I guess I'm just saying it's like
the opportunity.
Right. And I just think that the old model of parenting and teaching is this patriarchal, parochial, I guess is a better word, system of you do what I say because I'm in charge. And that you can say that, but it's never worked in human history. It's never created a society of people that were capable of being self-sufficient and turning out, a happier, better, healthier populace.
Yeah, and Montessori, one of her things that she said was talking about the child's potential and discovery of the child's potential. And she early on worked with children who were in her first experience, really, not first experience, but one of her first really documented experiences is that she worked with children in an asylum in the early 1900s.
Isn't this how she got invested in education?
Yes.
I believe she was on a visit somewhere and she just noticed.
Yeah, and so she was working at a psychiatric clinic, and she observed these developmentally delayed children, and they were playing with crumbs on the floor. They had nothing else to engage with, and there was even a remark from like a worker about how disgusting it was.
Right,
and she
that they were
she
basically
observed,
animals.
Yeah, and it was like they had just eaten, and they were and I guess it was like likened to that they were scrounging around for extra scraps. But she noticed that they were playing with the crumbs on the floor.
Right.
Because they had nothing else, right?
Right.
And so she was shocked by how underestimated these children were. Not just neglected, but underestimated.
Right.
And she used that scientific mind of hers, right? And gave them materials to manipulate. Because I read somewhere that not only were they just like, flicking the crumbs around, but they were like pushing them together, molding them into things. And she gave them materials to manipulate and started tracking their progress through that methodical observation.
Right. You know what really struck me about that is that, and I want to say something here, just a little bit of a trigger warning for anybody that, is interested in Maria Montessori and wants to learn more about her past and how she came up with her method, you're going to learn and run into some pretty problematic language by today's standards.
Yeah.
I think she called them her adorable idiots or something like that.
Yes.
The thing you need to understand is that the world has changed very much. That was a clinical term at that time. I mean,
there was a lot of terminology in her writings that we would not use today.
Right.
For sure.
But she was so far ahead of her time. Don't get hung up on that, because she was so far ahead of her time that she was one of the first people to look at those people with and see, not the first, but definitely one of a small minority of people to look at people like that, to these children who had been tossed aside like animals, and see their inherent human value, and genuinely believed that anyone could achieve intellectual success or academic success of some level if they were given the proper stimulation. And she was not wrong. She was absolutely not wrong. I mean, is everybody, I hope I'm going to say this right. I have this thought sometimes, like, about driving. Driving is it's not natural to me. It's very, like, I don't have the greatest hand-eye coordination. I don't. There's some people that I know that I look at sometimes and I marvel at how I don't think they're the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree, but they'll be like fantastic drivers. And you think like, but honestly, the lesson I take from that is like, nerdy stuff. I say nerdy stuff. I was born just interested. That's my genetics. I was just born with a drive towards, like, my uncle used to joke, his big concern about me learning to drive is that I would be sitting at the red light or the light going, green, yellow, red. Why did they decide on green, yellow, red? Why is it that color of green? Like that I just was born asking questions that way. A lot of people may not have been, but if they had been encouraged from early on instead of told they were stupid because they didn't naturally have the same drive to get, the gold star for getting best first in your spelling bee or what have you, if they had been nurtured for the intellect that they did have and met at their own level and taught that they were responsible for their own education, God, how much smarter would this world be?
Well, and that's another philosophy as well, is the different types of intelligences. And,
I firmly believe in that.
Yeah, it's like you tell a fish to climb a tree, how well are they going to be able to do that, right? Versus a chimpanzee, right? So, and one thing about these children in the asylum is that, like, children to begin with were hardly thought of as real humans, let alone developmentally delayed children. And, she got these kids to the point where they later did pass standardized testing. Which is
crazy.
And
for that era,
that were
especially
typically given to, quote unquote normal children, right? So if so-called unteachable children could learn with the right approach, then all children deserve a better education.
Yeah, and what's remarkable about her too, and like I don't interrupt you, but I want to point this out here in case it gets lost, is that here in the United States, again, there is a bias against Montessori. It's better now than it was when when we were younger, and when I was a child, it was never even talked about. By the time you were in school, people talked about Montessori schools and things like that, but it was still, you had the Miss Lippy idea of what a classroom was like.
Well, and you had to be privileged to be able to
access that. And honestly, to a large degree, that is still true. There's still quite a bit of unaccreditation, and even it's still very rare to find a good Montessori academy near you, and to be able to afford it is a whole nother thing. But in Europe, like, her method became, think about how revolutionary. She was a woman in a time when her father was furious with her he would escort her back. She would have to have an escort back and forth. Part of the reason she left medicine was because men were so awful and sexist and terrible to her. Her own father was furious with her for daring to do that. But she develops this method, and not only did she get some recognition, it took over. It took over Europe.
And I wonder if like with World War II, if all of the stuff that happened with her, which I can talk more about.
Yeah.
With, Montessori and fascism and Nazism. Like, if all of that stuff had not happened, how much more widespread would it be?
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
Because, like, initially her schools were supported by Mussolini.
Yeah.
Basically because she had prestige and he, kind of wanted in on that and wanted to use her schools for, nefarious purposes.
Right. But I mean, she had Spain beg, ask her to come, the Netherlands,
And he withdrew support from her when she refused to align with his ideology.
Which, how did he not see that one coming?
Right, because her schools emphasize peace, they emphasize independence, free thought.
Right.
That's not going to align with, what Mussolini wants.
And you're not going to be able to bully a woman who has already broken so many. I mean, she was an iconoclast. She was not trying to hear about fitting into your...
No.
She had already had to spit in the eye of so many social norms to achieve the things that she had done. I don't know why in the world he thought she was going to cave to that.
Yeah, and then in Hitler's Nazi regime, they banned Montessori schools and burned them down. They labeled them subversive. Her books were banned, her books were burned, and sometimes effigies were burned with her books. Can you imagine...
Being her?
Being like that important because you're an educator. One thing that I learned in one of my trainings was that first they would send in the armies, then they would send in the teachers.
That makes sense.
Re-education, right? How powerful is a teacher?
Quote unquote re-education.
Right, exactly.
Brainwashing is another term for that.
Yeah, and she was forced to leave Italy.
Yeah.
She became a political exile. She continued to work from abroad. Because...
And thank God she was smart enough to do that, too.
Yes.
That was one of the things I could not find much information about, was how she felt about that. I don't really...
Yeah,
I wasn't able to find anything.
I don't think she's very much into, like, talking about her feelings.
Yeah, she did not really seem to be...
There's not a lot, like we were talking about, like a journal or something. She's not very much like, oh, I was so sad about this. It's just like she just continues her work no matter where she goes.
She had a whole child and didn't tell anybody for 15 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which that kind of baffles me.
Yeah, like how she was so visibly out in the world. Yeah. We don't have enough time to really go down the rabbit hole of the jackass that got her pregnant and then bailed on her.
Yes, yeah.
But the fact that she was able to continue her work all the way up to the point where this kid was apparently born, and then, still be part of his life, and no one had any clue until she died. The rest of the world, until she named him in her will. He became her assistant, but he knew. But I mean, how she accomplished that.
But that's amazing, like, especially with the things that she faced. Like, I would shield my child from that.
Oh, I would too. But the fact that she could do it, as you said, I mean, because she was, for most of her life, she was a fairly petite little woman, and how she could carry an entire pregnancy off with the scrutiny that she was under.
Yeah, for sure.
And get away with it is really, and hold on to her dignity and her peace and her piece of the, her prestige is just, it's really remarkable.
I'm not sure when her son was born. I'm curious about that because
I want to say she was like 27, so like 1897 when she born in 1870.
Yes. And my thought is just where did he was born in 1898, so I mean she was already, that was 2 years before she started working at the asylum.
So she hadn't even gotten into education at that point.
No.
She was still just a practicing doctor. Not just, but she was still a practicing doctor.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but it still had renown. I mean, she had the reason that she was able to take over an education the way she was is that she was already a notable figure from just the fact that she was one of the very few female doctors in Italy, in Europe, in the world, actually.
Yeah,
at the time.
Yeah, and she went on to do a lot of really cool stuff. I mean, she, like I said, many hats. I mean, she did so much.
But again, I want to stop enough for us to just really pause, and I hope anybody listening to this is thinking about what she was overcoming. We look at the world around us right now, and there's so much reason to be frustrated or to give up or to be in despair. This woman had to completely carve out a world. She didn't know about a world where women could go to medical school anytime they wanted. She didn't know about a world where you didn't have to have a male escort.
She had to do dissections alone because it was supposed to be done with lab partners, and no one would be her lab partner.
Right. I mean, she had to give up her own child because society would not allow her to have a child, not out of wedlock, definitely, but even I think if she'd been married, she wouldn't have been able. I think that's part of why she didn't get married, was because she would have been forced to give up her career at that point. But not only did she, and then she had to live through. First of all, Italy had just become a country. There was a lot of violence. There was a lot of turmoil. These rights had not even been acknowledged for women yet, and she forced the world to give them to her. Yeah. And then she created an education system that she wanted to see, and then she went around the world. She had an entire world war going on. She was kicked out of her own country, and she just went to another country and just kept on trucking.
Did the same thing here.
Yeah. She did not allow despair to stop her from, or the turmoil, or the things that could go wrong and were going wrong, to stop her from her work.
Right. Yeah, and she worked in India for a long time. And before I talk about that, I want to mention that she did her Casa dei Bambini, which is, the casa is the children's house. When she did that, when she created that for the first time, it was in Rome, in San Lorenzo in 1907. She was just asked to supervise children who were left unsupervised while parents worked, basically.
Yeah.
It was a poor district. She was excited to work with quote-unquote normal children.
And again, this was the beginning of standardized education.
Yes. And so these were normal children in that they were not developmentally delayed, right? These were still children impacted by low socioeconomic status. Mm-hmm. So they're, we have to recognize that there is a difference there between them and privileged children.
Oh, for sure. I was one of those children. I absolutely understand the difference that poverty can make in a child's life, and the stress and the
the
lack of and the lack of emphasis placed on education. That was not my experience. I want to be very clear if my mom's out there listening. My mother, from the moment I was born, she was much like Maria's mom. She let me read whatever I felt like I was capable of reading at that time. And I love her for it, and I appreciate it. And my aunt that raised me, same way. They always allowed me to determine whatever my brain was interested in. They tried to support me in that. But that was not the norm. There were a lot of people, my uncle that raised me, his brother was called schoolboy because he wanted to finish high school. I mean, they teased him mercilessly about it. And this was in the 50s, 50s or 60s, that was just a lot of, like I said, not just one grandparent quit school in 3rd or 4th grade in the 30s and 40s. Education was just not necessarily the priority in households where you're just trying to get by. Yeah.
So, but she created this school with the materials, with the children's size furniture and tools.
Which is the norm now.
Which is, and her developing materials. Her materials were not completely created at the time, but she was working on that with some influence from some other philosophers and educators. But these children flourished. They learned to read, they learned to write, they learned to care for their environment. And she noticed that their discipline and joy did not come from being under adult control. It came from them having purposeful work. They really enjoyed it. And so that success launched the Montessori method. And it drew international attention. And then the next year, after a deadly earthquake in Messina, she helped organize care and education for a ton of orphaned and displaced children after
I missed that. I didn't read.
Devastating earthquake. And she, there's a lot about her looking at their faces and how sad they were, but her care for them, it reinforced her belief in the healing power of purposeful work. And that routine and the dignity that was given to these children who had experienced trauma. Mm-hmm. So she had experience with the children in the asylum, children who were normally developmentally, and then children who were normal developmentally and then had experienced a mass trauma. Mm-hmm. And, this really highlights her humanitarian side. She went and did this work because she just felt like she was needed.
Mm-hmm. Well, and she was, and she made a difference.
Yeah.
And again, I hate to stop you again, but there's another point that just because these are so many of the things that I really believe in life, the dignity of work. Mm-hmm. I think another problem with our society is that we don't. So many of us, and me included, definitely me. I had this idea that when I was a kid, I was going to grow up and I was going to be an actress, and I was going to, tour the world and do everything, be an astronaut, singer, princess,
ballerina,
right?
Yeah.
And my philosophy now as a parent is, and Ava quotes it. I love it because she tells her friends this all the time now. You can be anything you want. You just can't be everything you want.
Yeah.
Because work matters and your time matters. It took me a while. I went through a big depression and a lot of that was genetics and just whatever, but some of it too was just this idea of, is this it? Like you have to go to a job every day and do things that you don't care about, yada, yada, yada. And it took me coming to work. I was a receptionist for a restaurant company based here in Nashville. And I, just thought this was just where I'm going to get my foot in the door. I'm going to figure out what I want to do and just take the world by storm. And I met this lady named Stephanie Newman, and Stephanie Newman does not know it, but she changed my life. I didn't even work directly for her. I wasn't in her department. She was just an administrator, I'm using air quotes, an administrator. She was the best administrator that I have ever seen in my life, and she did it with a smile. Even when she was mad or frustrated or what have you, she had such self-control and discipline, and it didn't take me long to realize she ran that place. Her and a handful of other women, they didn't have the fancy titles. They didn't have the, whatever, but they ran that place, and it truly would have fallen apart without them keeping all of the wheels spinning. And it just something, maybe that was one of what was the term that you used, developmental levels, or what was it?
The planes of development.
Planes of development, where maybe it was what the kids say, where is your prefrontal cortex hardening, because I was about 25. But I thought, I want to be like her. I didn't give a shit about being famous or being none of that anymore. It wasn't that I had this burning desire to even climb a ladder, because I'm still, fortunately, I'm in a situation where my husband is the primary breadwinner and has always made quite a bit more money than I do, which is allowed, and he travels though, so that's why. So it's allowed me to be the primary, but when the kids were small, somebody was always here I didn't have to climb a corporate ladder or whatever. I still don't care about that. I care about pressing women like Stephanie. I care about customer service.
Make Stephanie proud.
Yes. And the dignity of work. And just something clicked with me then that I was like, I have been doing administrative work for the last, and I never, if you told 15-year-old Mandy she's going to be punching a clock and just doing data entry and answering phones all day, I'd have died. Not literally, but I was really dramatic and I would have announced I was dying. But I have enjoyed it so much. I have made a difference in people's lives. I have made people happy. I have solved problems for them. And if I wasn't doing that, what the hell would I be doing? Work is the point.
Right, exactly.
That doesn't mean stay somewhere that you hate, but it absolutely means taking pride in what you do is the point of all of it.
Yeah, I mean, because if you're just getting up every day to work for the weekend, what are you doing?
Right.
Having purposeful work is everything.
It's going to make you, in my opinion, far happier than being, one of these celebrities that's always miserable and hates their life. I don't think it's the amount of money. I don't think it's the fame. I don't think it's anything like that. If that's your goal, you want to be an entertainer or what have you, but I think that you're chasing...
I mean, I'll take more money.
Right, we will all take more money. But I think one of the best lessons you can learn in life is to look at what you can and can't control and to decide you are going to be happy where you are at, wherever that is at the moment. And even if your goal is to get somewhere else, you're not going to get up every day and discount what you do as just anything. You're going to go in and you're going to be the best at what you are, you're going to go in and you're going to make your work matter, whether that's sweeping a broom, whether it's answering a phone. We, the workers of the world, not to get all Karl Marx, but we make this world go.
Yeah, and teachers are so important. For enhancing that work, I guess. And my disenchantment with the traditional education system is not to say that there are not good teachers out there, because I have worked with many a good teacher, incredible women, and I say men too, but I haven't worked with that many men.
Yeah, there just really are more women. Yeah,
yeah, there are. But one thing that's funny is it's a lot of first daughters is.
Yeah,
a lot of us teachers.
That's funny.
We actually took a poll at the training, and it was like all but one of us.
That's pretty funny.
Was a first daughter. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, we bring so much to the fold, and
you control so much.
Yes. Yeah.
You have power. That's exactly what I'm getting at. Is like, it seems as if the billionaires and of the oligarchs that they run, and to a very real degree they have far too much influence, but the real power, if we would just recognize it, is in us workers here,
the everyday people.
Yes, the everyday people on the ground, who you have the power to keep questioning. You have the power to keep going. You have the power to get up every day and look for joy in your life. It's got to be an action. It's not going to be like when you were 2 and you woke up and somebody
things just were how they were.
somebody handed everything to you.
Yeah,
that's the great thing about Maria. And that's actually
they have to learn how to do those things early on.
Well, and that's kind of like the irony of this is that I always thought it was this big hippy dippy thing, and actually it's the opposite. It's teaching kids from very early on. You have work to do, and that work is good work. That work is powerful. That work means something. It matters. The world needs it. You matter. What you do matter. Everyone matters. And it's not just hippy dippy kumbaya. They learn that that's true because they do it with their hands. They're makers, just the same way that a mechanic or an artist or anybody else.
Yeah.
All of us have things that we do that you can do it badly or you can do it well. And that's the power that you have.
And they learn a lot about that. Like, there's a lot of things about, like, we're going to learn today about where our bread comes from,
Right.
And so, and then, at the end, they're like, thank you to the bread maker.
They learn that those people are
Thank you
powerful.
To the packager. Thank you to the delivery truck driver, because it's just so important to recognize those things. And that has been part of Montessori stuff for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was from the beginning. That seemed to be...
Yeah.
For someone who had...
Giving thanks to the world, giving thanks to the earth, and giving thanks to the people around you is such a core thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of that, like, cosmic education.
Which is remarkable because she was a privileged person. Like, she wasn't super wealthy, but she was born to privilege. And she could have passed through her whole life sneering at the people underneath her. But she saw the inherent dignity in everybody.
In everyone.
Yeah. And that is what we need more of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that cosmic education is a huge thing that she kind of developed in her time in India, which is like a education model that she developed that emphasizes like the interconnection of everybody and of
I didn't read much about that. Yeah.
It's a very cool concept. She started training in India. She left. She lived in India from 1939 to 1946. And she and her son, they went to India to just conduct teacher training courses. Mm-hmm. But then World War II broke out, and they were interned as enemy aliens. They were just like on house arrest.
Yeah.
Because they were Italian nationals in British India at the time. She was allowed to continue her work during all that time. So she did, and she did that for 7 years. And she trained hundreds and hundreds of Indian teachers.
Yeah, she could have just been sitting up there panicking or despairing about her homeland.
She just kept doing her work, girl.
She just kept working. And I'm sure she did feel those things. She was a human, but she got up and just that her philosophy drove her. She was like,
really. And
rain or shine, there's work to do.
And that time that she spent with those people, really, the people of India, it really deepened her interest in spirituality and peace education, which peace was already like a big part of her model, but it really helped her to develop that more. Her time in India influenced her philosophy deeply.
I did read it, but I didn't read much about it. Honestly, early modern history is one of my weaker points as far as like my knowledge of history goes, but I believe that would have been right around the time that Gandhi, I want to say he passed in the early 30s maybe, but I would imagine that like that was still a very big topic in India.
Yeah, she gained the respect of Gandhi.
So he was alive when she was there. Okay.
Yeah. And India actually became a major center of Montessori teacher training because of this. Many of today's global Montessori trainers trace lineage back to that time. Like their teacher was this person who was this person who was trained in India by Montessori.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a lady I follow on TikTok. Her name's the Knitting Cult Lady, and her name's Daniela, but she goes by the Knitting Cult Lady, and I love her to death. She's really, not her personally, I don't know her personally, but what I love about her is that she was born into the Church of God cult, and it's a horrific story. I'll let you borrow her book if you're ever interested in it. She wrote a book about growing up in the Church of God. She was third generation in the Church of God. Horrendous things happened to her. And she, at 15, was like, I'm out. Like, just, she knew it was bullshit. And she was tired of the abuse and all of that. So she went emancipated, basically, at 15 into what they call the system. They called it a system. People that weren't Church of God or Children of God, systemites. And so she went to, did I say Church of God? I meant Children of God, if I've been saying Church of God.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that, Church of God. Children of God. It's a horrendous cult. It was basically a pedophile cult that it's bad things happened to her. But her mother had been born, or basically her father had kidnapped her and brought her into it when she was 2. So that was all her mother knew. And she had her at 14. It was really awful. But anyway, Daniela got out of there at 15, emancipated herself, was driven to get her degree. But then she went into the army. She didn't know what to do. And so she went into the army, and she later recognized, because it felt comfortable, because it was another cult. And it was another place that it's all about divorcing your free will and turning it over to a system, somewhere else. So it's ironic that they called us systemites, that they were the ones that really, rigidly. And so now she eventually went to Harvard and became, when she saw the rise of MAGA, mostly, she started to become very concerned about the effects that the cult-like thinking might start having on our future. And so she went and got a degree from Harvard Extension, and she became an expert on cults and cult-like thinking. And I've been wondering, like, what she thinks about Montessori, because to my mind, it's almost the anti-cult. Because, it was centered around one charismatic person, but she unlike a cult leader, she deliberately demystified herself.
And she was like, free thought. Think for yourself, baby. Like, that's what this is all about.
Yes. Yeah. So I've wondered what she would think about Montessori, because it is, in some ways, very much a thought system, a belief system, but the entire belief system is about returning free will and free thought to the individual,
back to the person,
as opposed to having one charismatic leader who tells you to think like I do or you're wrong.
Right. And part of like cosmic education is that it's to help children understand like their place in the world. So it's not just about interconnectedness of all life. It's also about understanding your place in that
as the individual,
and helps them to foster a sense of like responsibility toward the world,
right?
Like being able to like really understand, like, I affect people around me. I can't just I do need to have my own thoughts, but I can't just do whatever I want all the time.
Right. That your actions have consequences.
Yes.
Right.
And so it's like, it's just, I don't know. It's like, it like I said earlier, it just baffles me that this isn't just like everybody
common
does
sense.
that.
Yeah, you're right. What I have learned, well, I'm not even going to say learned because I still don't understand it. But what I have seen and I have theories about, but I don't fully understand, is that a lot of people just want to be told what to do. They just...
I think people, it's hard for them to make decisions, but, think about what education system these people have grown up in.
Agreed.
And there are some really good readings that are Montessori about school as a factory.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about cranking out workers who don't know how to make their own decisions.
Mm-hmm. And keeping them docile and...
Exactly. So that's why these people, they want to follow someone who makes their decisions for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what they've been taught to do.
Yeah. I think that to a certain degree, some of it is human nature with certain... I mean, like, again, I honestly think I probably could have been diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder or whatever, because from the moment I came out, I was like, prove it. Like,
yeah, I don't think so.
Right. Maybe if you can prove it to me. And that's
right.
That's, I think, one of the things that I feel like I'm misunderstood about. I do learn. I do take advice from people. I do change my mind about things, but you have to prove it to me. You have to show me the evidence that what I believe is not the correct thing. I'm not going to just blindly believe that because that's how it's always been done. You said.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's because of me being a special person. I think genuinely some of that is genetics. I think part of the reason that this parochial method of education has been the norm for so long is that the entirety of society has been a strongman rules type of existence. But what gives me great hope and what keeps me going is that in no world does it make sense, because we're animals and tooth and claw is what normally determines who is the top of the food chain in the animal world. Montessori schools shouldn't exist. Human rights shouldn't exist. The idea of human equality shouldn't really exist. But it does, because we are more than that. We are more than animals. Yes, we are more than animals. I think a lot of people forget that. I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with that. And
how much potential we really do have.
Right.
That was a big thing with Montessori, is that, to see the child, see the person, see them as capable.
Yeah.
Not just empty, not just a nothing, not just a,
right. Yeah, we're born into systems immediately, most of us, that you are told religion. You're taught, and I'm a Christian. I go to, I identify myself as Catholic, but religion has harmed a lot of people. This idea that because a lot of religious leaders have told people, I have the magic answer, you don't question. Don't look too deeply at why none of this makes any sense. Don't look for the proof of any of this, because if you do, you're going to suffer for it. And that's not just like, some of that is just this belief in supernatural, but it's also practically you were shunned. Yeah. You could lose your life for questioning. So we just get bred from birth, most of us, to just accept this is how it's always been. None of that other stuff is going to work. This is what works. And I think we've done ourselves a real disservice.
Yeah.
But people like Maria give me a lot of hope.
Yeah, and this has worked for over 100 years.
Yeah. And that's why we've moved the needle on.
And it's actually, I think that it's actually a couple days from now that the anniversary of her opening the Casa dei Bambini.
Oh, well, congratulations. Happy anniversary, Maria.
Yeah, like 129 years or something like that.
I'll just Google it.
I was looking at that the other day, and I was like, oh, well, that's a couple days. Like,
let me see what that is. That'd be right around. Look, we could celebrate that with our birthdays.
Yes, our tandem birthdays.
Yeah, mine and Emily's birthdays are both this coming up week, so we might be celebrating it with the Montessori's.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Montessori anniversary. August 31st.
Oh, I wonder what I was seeing.
Yeah, I don't know. It says Maria Montessori's. Oh, that's her birthday. Let's see.
let's see, the Casa dei Bambini was opened January 6, 1907. It was, girl, maybe I just can't read. I don't know.
Well, you're not wrong. It's not too far down the road, and it looks like next year will be the 150th anniversary. But yeah, I mean, it's the outliers. That's how powerful a few thinking people can be. Because again, I believe that the vast tide of humanity has been perfectly fine, or at least not struggled too hard against this go along to get along mentality. But you have these very powerful few outliers who have stood up and been like, but what if we did this? And because of that,
the fuse,
it's just the fuse. And that's why we have democracy. That's why we have modern science. That's why we have, the amenities that we have. All of that has come from that tiny handful of people in this sea of humanity who've been like, but what if we did this?
Yeah, let's do something a little bit different because the world deserves it.
Yeah, it's just you had to buy in. Anyway, is there anything else you want to... We've been going... I told you we could...
Yeah, I knew we'd be able to talk about this. I just want to say, if you are interested in reading about Montessori, do not be, like we talked about earlier, do not be discouraged or pushed away because of the language or terminology that's used. And also don't be discouraged that a lot of this stuff is written in an older in an older way that kind of makes it hard to understand sometimes.
Yeah.
Do what you can to parse it in different ways to make it make sense to you. Whatever you gotta do is fine. Look for different articles that kind of summarize it in a different way so that you can understand it, because I understand some of that older language is not dense. It's very dense, and Maria was...
It's like reading the King James Bible.
Yes, yeah. Maria is a very verbose woman. Yeah. And it was translated, right?
And it was translated.
Yeah, so there's that. But, I just want to say that, she is still influencing modern ideas about early childhood education. And her relevance is, she emphasized equity, inclusion, and child empowerment. And how... modern of her, what I mean?
Insanely modern.
She advocated for women's rights, children's rights, peace education, global citizenship is something that she advocated for. I think her approach is especially relevant today with her focus on curiosity, independence, empathy, and real world learning. Mm-hmm. That stuff that really matters. And I want to say a kind of a final quote from her. It says, "Free the child's potential and you will transform him into the world."
That's profound. Yeah. I think that touches on everything we said about, how it's important to make people understand that your individual actions absolutely do impact everybody around you for good and ill, but for good. I mean, we hear so much about you don't want to hurt things, but you can also do incredible things too. I do wish though we're getting an hour 45 at this point, but I really wish we'd had more time to talk about her feminism, because the things that she espoused for women, which were incredibly revolutionary at the time. And again, she didn't live in a world where she already had these role models. She was the role model. She was her own role model. She was repeatedly told, no, this is not. And frankly, even today, but especially then, and I'm not being incredibly judgy because America is incredibly patriarchal as well, but it was a pretty sexist society. Italy was incredibly, the whole machismo culture is very well known. And so for her to buck that and still go out and live joyously and accomplish the things that she did, I mean, any of us can do whatever we set our mind to. Again, you can do anything. You may not be able to do everything,
but you can do anything.
But you can do anything.
Yeah, and I would encourage people, if they're interested in Montessori stuff, to seek out the literature on it. There are videos that you can watch.
Yeah, I found a bunch.
You can watch videos of Montessori classrooms at work and just observe. Yeah. I highly recommend that.
Yeah. Did you read at all about how she came to the Pan American exhibition? Was kind of like a world fair in, I want to say it was 1907 or thereabouts, that she ran a classroom at a World's Fair in San Francisco for 4 months with a glass. No. It was literally a glassed in classroom, and she made a requirement. They had thousands of people that wanted their children to be part of it, and her requirement was that they couldn't take any children that had ever been in any kind of a Montessori education. And thousands had bleachers around this glass classroom, and people came and watched, and they were really impressed with watching the kids prepare their own lunches every day.
I have not heard about that.
Yeah, they would go get.
I have to look into that.
Yeah,
That's
they
really
would.
Cool.
They'd go and get like food from the vendors and stuff, and they'd bring it back and watch these kids. And the kids just ignored them for the most part. That was the thing that was really impressive to a lot of people.
They have their purposeful work.
Right. They were just sitting there doing their work. And after that, that was an impetus. Like the biggest route for Montessori in the United States was Hollywood, was around in California, because a lot of the famous celebrities, kids, went to the Montessori academies out there, even as early as the silent film stars. Their kids.
Yeah, sorry, it needs to be made more accessible and readily available. That's why I'm excited to be a part of this school that I'm joining the founding team for, because it's a public charter, and so it's...
Yeah, that's great.
It's the first public charter Montessori school in Nashville.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
I didn't realize that it was, when you said public charter, I didn't really register what that means.
Very
so that's
exciting
awesome
stuff. And, I imagine how well my son Caden would have thrived in a Montessori classroom.
Same with Ava.
Him having ADHD and, being all over the place and stuff. But when you're in charge of your work, you don't look like you're all over the place.
Right.
It's just so different, and I'm just so curious to see how my children develop.
Well, I always say, I tell Ava that those kind of, I don't want to diagnose anybody, but I just, to use a understandable term, like the ways that we are neuroatypical, don't look at it as a failing. It can be your superpower.
It's a difference in learning.
It's just a difference. I think it's why, I absolutely believe that I am eaten up with ADHD, but I've never bothered to go and get a diagnosis, because in my line of work, it actually works very well for me.
Right. It doesn't have to be a disability.
Right.
It doesn't have to be, even if you wanted to call it that, it doesn't have to actually disable you.
Right. In certain environments, given the right support, given the right philosophy around that, learning to use the way that your brain works in a way that is going to be the optimal for you. And I think Montessori would have been a fantastic thing for our kids. So I think it's great. I think it's awesome. I hope that a lot of teachers out there that maybe aren't even, or maybe working in the public school system, will look more into how they can incorporate Montessori philosophies into their classroom.
Just into their classroom. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that I did that I didn't know was Montessori, and I really encourage, even just the way that you move in the classroom, slow, thoughtful. You speak, in a low tone, calmly. Not saying that I did that when I was teaching before, because I did, when you know better,
you didn't know,
better,
right?
And I didn't know then. And now it's wow, this, of course this makes sense, duh. But it's there's so many things that you can incorporate into a traditional classroom, and I highly encourage any teacher to look into it and look at what they can do in their class.
I think they'd be better teachers and probably suffer far less burnout and frustration with the system in general. Okay, we are sitting down here with Emily and her family, and we're getting ready to take part in this delicious dinner that we both work to prepare, thank God, because Italian food is very labor intensive. But I was really excited when you said you wanted to do an Italian woman, because, man, I love some Italian food. And I try not to eat it because pasta is not my friend. But man, it's so good. So, Emily, do you want to say what you made?
So I made a pull-apart garlic bread. I made Italian chicken noodle soup, and I made a pasta called aglio e olio. It means garlic and oil. It's a garlic and oil pasta with a crap ton of Parmesan in it. It's delicious.
It's very good.
Both the pasta and the soup were my Italian grandmother's recipes that have been passed down to me. Which she was not really that great of a cook, but
She had the recipes.
If she could do it, anybody could do it. And so they've kind of gotten better as they've kind of come down through the generations. My mom, fixing it up real good, and then, I've kind of got my own versions too. but the pasta is very simple. I really like that about it.
Well, do you want to share your recipe on my
I can.
socials? Okay, so we'll do that. We'll put that. I'll actually remember this time to put the recipes in the socials when we. I'm actually doing a better job of getting some photos so you guys can see how awesome this whole setup is. We are in Emily's mom, my friend Kelly's house with her wife Steffi, and we are joined by her husband Christopher and her beautiful children. Do you want everybody to say hello?
Sure, we can say hi.
Everybody, 1, 2, 3.
Hi!
Yay! So what I made was, and I'm gonna just skip this in the recording because by the time we get this posted, either half the world's already heard this story a million times or they're not interested. But there was a big kerfluffle, a scandal, if you will, on TikTok over the 4th of July, and it involved antipasta salad, which is actually more of a caprese salad, but I've been craving it. So really this whole podcast was an elaborate scheme for me to make this dish. It's delicious. It's just different types of tomatoes, and then you've got like soppressata and prosciutto and spicy salami, and then you put some mozzarella, and then you put, I get the little Italian accent there at the end.
Yeah.
And then basil, and then you just kind of splash the whole thing down with some balsamic.
It's very good.
Yeah, it was delicious.
I tried to pick it up and bite it like a sandwich, and I got tomato juice all over me.
That's exactly how I ate it, and that's exactly what happened to me as well. But oh my gosh, this is also good. Italian does not let you down.
And you also made a cake for when we're done.
Oh yeah. I was not going to try to attempt real tiramisu or cannoli. I wanted to try to find something authentically from Rome because that's where she's from. But at this point, I think it's kind of like the United States where Italy is just, there's not really anything regional that you're not going to find in Rome. Mm-hmm. Rome almost seems like New York in the way that there's very few things that are actually culturally just Roman dishes. It seems like it's kind of just a melting pot of all of the other different parts of Italy. So I was going to say, one of the things I try to do when I research this stuff is to try to find an actual recipe that was either prepared by that person, or I know that it was culturally relevant to them, or that they at least ate one time. And you cannot find anything like that about Maria Montessori. Emily's going to tell us a little bit about the Montessori philosophy of food and food hygiene here in a minute. But I want to say, Emily, that on the way here, I did find a podcast that was someone reading the chapter from Maria Montessori's journal, where she describes what she thinks children should be eating. The woman was brilliant, incredibly brilliant. I can't believe all of the different things she did. Don't think she was a nutritionist. Mm-mm. Have you read that chapter?
I haven't, but at the same time, I mean, she was a doctor, so...
She was, but she was a doctor in the late 1800s, early 1900s, That's fair, and you could tell it showed. She believed that children between the ages of birth and 2 should predominantly eat milk and eggs, which that makes sense. Well, actually, they don't recommend eggs anymore for children under 1, do they?
Not under 1, no.
Yeah, but that part wasn't so crazy, but from 2 to 5, or I think 2 to 3.5, no meat or anything like that, which again, that's normal. But she thinks their diet should mostly consist of fat and sugar.
Love that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really goes along with her model of wanting children to lead things, because I'm sure that they do.
Yeah, that's what they would choose, I'm sure.
Right, but she believes that, and no vegetables. No vegetables. If you can possibly avoid it, children should not have vegetables. That was I'm like, did a child pay you to write this?
Yeah, it sounds like it, but like you said, she was a doctor a long time ago.
Yeah.
And it took a long time to even get out of the idea of the humors. So
right.
Who knows?
That's a good point.
Who knows what was actually supporting that at that point. And a lot of her philosophy is based on wholesome foods, like whole foods. So I would assume sugar means fruits.
No, it meant sugar. No,
really?
Yeah,
Just
chocolate.
Sweets?
She really believed sugar. Fruits were fine. Vegetables were a no-go except for some spinach in limited amounts. Yeah, because you know how many kids
spinach,
really love spinach. Yeah, but no other fruit, vegetables. I will say, I thought a little bit about it, and I think maybe the thought process has some validity because kids do need a lot of fat.
They do need a lot of energy. They burn a lot of energy.
Yeah, and sugar again, like you said. So carbs in general, children do need a lot of carbs. And this woman was reading a translation. So it very well could be that what she actually meant were carbohydrates, but she absolutely did say, like,
chocolate.
She very much recommended chocolate as one of the afternoon snacks that kids should have.
I mean, I agree.
It was really cool. Like, you should live.
I mean, for me at least.
Right, me too. I'm down with it. It just was, I was surprised. But it reminded me kind of the Eleanor Roosevelt episode that I did was about how nutrition played a huge part in her term as the first lady, because they came in right at the beginning of the Great Depression, and she had this philosophy that they wanted to be an example to the American people that they were not better than them and that they were living the same life that everyone else was living as much as possible with the same hardships. Isn't it? What a crazy concept for a presidency. But anyway, she made her chief of staff serve the most atrocious meals. They were really, really bad, famously bad.
Like Jell-O.
Oh no! I mean, like, again, this was the first episode I did, and what we had was an actual lunch from the White House menu, and it was boiled eggs, and then you take the yolk out, and you're thinking I'm gonna devil it. No. You take it out, you mash it up with some onion, and then put some just unseasoned tomato sauce on top of it. And that was that and mashed potatoes and coffee, black coffee. That was and prune pudding, which by the way turned out to not be that bad. But she based all of that on.
But the rest sounds terrible.
Right, it was one of the worst things I've ever eaten in my life. But she based it on science of the time. It was, if you go back and listen to that episode, the most interesting part of it is how big of a thing home economics was, because when we were growing up, home economics was already old-fashioned, and kind of insulting to girls, because it was, I always thought, based on this idea that you needed to prepare to be a housewife. But actually it started out pretty progressive. It was the idea that women were already the homemakers and that they needed more respect, because it was very much something Maria Montessori would have approved of. It was that this idea of basing your nutritive needs on science, not necessarily what tastes best.
Well, I mean, I like that idea, but we can have good food that also tastes good.
Right.
It can be good for you and
there were people at the time telling Eleanor that, but Eleanor really just, in some ways, she just thought of food basically as fuel for the most part, and so she didn't really understand what the hubbub was. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Montessori philosophy of food is?
So, a big part of Montessori's methodology is practical life. They're in every, especially younger classrooms, there are going to be practical life areas of the classroom where they learn things like pouring water, how to button their shirt. Like they have these frames with fabric and buttons, and they learn how to use those, and zippers, and everything is child size, so even their little pitcher, very cute, and it's a glass pitcher.
I bet that's adorable.
It is. But it's really important that they learn how to prepare food and set the table, serve snacks to one another. That's part of the daily things that they do, is they'll have food set out that they can prepare for themselves or prepare plates for others and set everything out. So, ma'am. So
leave her alone.
She's playing with her noodles. But even in she's about to start. My daughter Stella is about to start school in August at a Montessori school, and even in the toddler classroom, they are allowed to prepare their food themselves. They learn how to do this themselves.
How does a toddler prepare food?
So it's like they have, let's say they have waffles as a snack, and they get to spread something on it. Sun butter or whatever it is that's approved for the classroom, or bagels, or
So they give them prepared items, but they teach them that you are part of the production process by giving them things they can do.
Yeah, and it's scaffolded for the age group, so it's appropriate for what they're capable of doing.
Right.
So in Montessori, there are different groups of age groups for classrooms, because you have mixed age groups. And so like toddler is going to be 18 months to 3 years old. And then primary is 3 to 6. And in primary, you're going to have more stuff like they're actually going to cut apples themselves.
They have like real paring knives, right?
Yes.
I read that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they learn to,
and that's
clean
not
up after
terrifying.
No. They learn how to do it, and that's part of the process. Obviously, you don't just like open a classroom to children who've never been in a Montessori school before and just say, here are the knives.
Right.
That wouldn't work.
Did Caden go to Montessori?
No, he did not. So it's going to be interesting to see, because he's almost 11 now and she's 18 months. So it's like, or she's almost 18 months. So it's like going to see the difference between the two of them being raised in different schools.
He's so smart and articulate. I think he could run a Montessori school.
I know.
I feel like he was born Montessori.
But I can't imagine the differences it would have made for him, because it's just different the way it works. You know? Hang on. So they learn like fine motor skills. They learn how to do things in order. They learn confidence, independence, and like one of her things is that children should have real tasks to do, not just a worksheet.
Right. I think the coolest part of it is that it makes them, I think, and just a little inside baseball of how we're doing this. Normally I record the dinner portion after we sit and introduce our subject, and this will be at the end after that, but we're actually recording it beforehand because we got kiddos that need to get their dinner in them before we get started. And I wanted to take this opportunity, because it's just a really special one, to actually have dinner together as a group, because I think that fits in with the theme.
Well, it's really big to have
both the Italian and the Montessori.
Exactly. Like this is a core tenet of growing up Italian.
Yeah.
But another thing is that food builds community.
Yeah. Well, and I think we'd be a more nutritious society if kids from very early on learned that things matter. Like that I don't know if I'm not saying that correctly, but I was thinking about it this week, and we'll get into it again. So this is actually going to be prologue for you guys. You may hear this earlier in the podcast, but I kind of raised my kids Montessori and didn't even realize it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I did in a classroom before being trained Montessori that I didn't know what I was doing was Montessori, but it makes sense because my philosophy fits so well with Montessori teaching.
Right. And I'm gonna learn so much from you, and there's still a million questions in my mind about how it works. But what I did like is that I think that I had to learn how to parent. Like, I didn't have a real great guidebook to start with, so I just used logic for the most part, and I think that children don't respond well to the carrot and the stick if the stick is most of what you're using as a parental tool. Like the model of parenting of do what I say, don't ask any questions, even if it works, it almost never works. But in best case scenario, you're raising a child who does not know how to make good decisions for themselves. And when they get out in the real world and you're not there to hold their hand and make every decision for them, they're going to be completely unequipped. So I tried to raise my children with responsibility pretty early on, and learning this idea of actions have consequences. I didn't do all of what the Montessori method does with nutrition, but I'm not opposed to it. I think it's a great idea because I think it makes kids think about, if you just tell a kid you can't have candy all the time and they don't understand why nutrition is important, if they don't have a buy-in in it, if all that is punitive, that they're going to buck against that. And I think that's part of the reason that we all have such unhealthy eating habits. But I think that if you're raised from a very young age understanding nutrition, and that can also be delicious, and that there are limits, and that there is no, you can't have this or you can't have that, but logic, that you learn self-sufficiency, that you learn what's the word I'm looking for, self-discipline.
Yeah.
And it's internal self-discipline. It's not something that's being forced on you.
And another thing that's really cool, kind of tying into that with Montessori schools, is that it's a really big tenet of Montessori education for them to have gardens and grow their own food.
Yeah.
And so
you have a stake in it.
Yeah. And so it's like, these are the vegetables, even though, maybe she didn't like them, but they're like, these are the vegetables that I grew. Like, I planted this, I harvested this, and now it's on my table.
She does recommend that once they're past the age. I mean, she actually advocates for home gardens.
And that's part of the connection to the universe and connection to, more than just yourself that you get, because like a lot of children now haven't seen whole foods.
Yeah, it comes at their store. It's kind of like the way I like to think of my meat just comes from these white packages at Kroger. I do not want to think about, but I'd probably be healthier if I did.
And a lot of these kids, they've seen a fruit cup, but have they seen a whole mandarin?
Right. Or where that mandarin comes from.
Right.
Yeah.
And
what it takes to grow that mandarin.
Right. And so they kind of get a sense of stewardship and gratitude from that.
Yeah. Which is a huge theme that I really like about Maria Montessori's philosophy.
And there's a lot of mindfulness that goes with it too. Like, meals are not super quick in a Montessori school. In a traditional school, you get 20, maybe 25 minutes. And half of that is standing in the cafeteria line.
At least half.
These kids get way more time to eat. They, and snack is going to be across like an hour where they can come up and get it when they're ready. Lunch is at least 30 minutes,
So they have time to sit down and enjoy.
Yes. Yeah. And they can talk with their friends. And it's supposed to be like not intentional. It's not rushed. It's a peaceful time instead of quick, you gotta go. We have another place to be after this.
Yeah.
Because that's
not healthy.
No.
Yeah. Which also leads to like a scarcity mindset. And I mean, like my kids, seriously, I don't know how bad it was when you were in school, but you're, I think, 10 years older than 11 years older than my oldest. Are you 32 this year?
Yes.
Yeah, you're 11 years older. By the time Ava got in high school, I mean, they were literally getting 10, 15 minutes to sit down and eat.
Right.
Yeah. Which is insane. And of course, they're not going to be able to get like a decent amount of nutrition in that amount of time. And even if they like bolt it down, that's not good for them either.
No, it's not good for your digestive system. It's not good for any of that. And it's just not good for you mentally either.
Right.
Even physically, of course, it's not good for you. But mentally, like, you don't get to have joy in food, which is so important. And that's an Italian thing. That's a Montessori thing. That should be,
a human thing.
A human thing, that you can find joy in food and in the present moment and sharing a meal with people around you that you care about.
Which I think is enhanced by them having ownership in it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they learn care of self, care of others. Yes, ma'am. I mean, she loves to share with me.
Hey, I'm going to be expecting her to make my dinner next time. I mean, she's got a year.
Yeah.
She's getting in the classroom. I'm going to expect her to be whipping something up for me next time I come over here. When does she start?
She starts August.
It's exciting.
Yeah. It's going to be good for her, I think. I'm very excited that it's more of a school environment than just like a daycare environment. You know?
Yeah. Well, you've got great genes, and you've got, your son is brilliant, and I'm sure she's going to be the same. So she's going to need more stimulation probably than the average classroom.
Yes, and we can get into that more because, you know, what I was saying about him, and like if he had been in a Montessori classroom, I'll definitely talk more about that, because the way it supports them in their endeavors is just above and beyond, you know.
I'm not going to get into that right now. Because I have a lot of questions about that.
Yeah.
All right.
I do have a little story from one of her writings. And there are a few quotes about eating and just kind of
Fire away.
So, in many early Montessori classrooms, children are responsible for preparing and serving food, like we said. And this is part of their daily work. A lot of things that they do are referred to as work. Most of what they do is work. If they're busy, you know, staying productive, nummy, that's work. So in one story from a children's house in Rome, so this isn't directly from Montessori, I don't think, but a small child who was not, you know, barely 4 years old, had prepared apple slices, carefully arranged them on a tray, and then without being asked, she carried the tray to a friend across the room and offered it with both hands. And the other child smiled, took a piece, and said thank you. And to someone who is not a Montessori observer, you may not pick up on the magnitude of this, and in that this little act, done without instruction, done without prompting, it shows more growth, grace, inner discipline than any, like I said, any worksheet would show. And that in that moment, that child was not just learning to serve food. She's learning to give. She's learning to wait. She's learning to care. She's learning patience. You know, and not just that, but also the fine motor skills that come with that. Carrying the tray carefully across the room, preparing the apple slices. And that's, we can get into that more, because fine motor is
a big part of this.
A really big part of this.
Yeah.
And it's very often missed in traditional education. So, you know, I just kind of, to wrap it up, it's just like, you know, we're honoring Montessori's belief that food is not just fuel. It's also part of our humanity. Mm-hmm.
That's a huge part of why I have this in this podcast. And it just, every episode I've found something fortuitous that has to do, that just reiterates how important food is to the human condition. And that was, even though I couldn't find a specific recipe that she personally enjoyed, just, she had such strong beliefs about food as part of community. Mm-hmm. And that's a large part of, again, why I wanted to include that in this podcast, was because I think it humanizes these people. It helps you to see them as an actual person, to think about them having favorite recipes, thinking about what they're going to eat, mm-hmm. food preparation, all of that. And I think that, you know, that what you mentioned about it also fostering community was, again, another one of my reasons for wanting to do this. And I think that it's, every single time, it's a great reminder to me how there are still so many simple joys in life, and mm-hmm. there's still such great dignity and happiness to be found in work, particularly work that is in service of others.
Yeah.
And a lot of times food preparation, especially as parents, is exactly that. So
it's sharing our love with those around us. You know?
Yeah, and sometimes the only way you can. And, you know, the best times, worst times, you can always give somebody, you know, apple slices if that's all you got.
Right, yeah, you can share that, and, you know, it's the act of it. And there is a quote that says, it's not directly about food itself, but it says, the child who has become master of his acts through long and repeated exercises, and who has been encouraged by the pleasant and interesting activities in which he has been engaged, is a child filled with health and joy and remarkable for his calmness and discipline. And that's from The Discovery of the Child, written by Montessori herself. And that, where she was talking about that in Discovery of the Child, she was talking about pouring, serving, and eating, and how those things are part of the child's self-mastery and independence.
Yeah, which is the greatest thing I think that she brought to this world, is that idea, and it's a shame that it is not more widely understood by the greater public. It's a shame that Montessori did not win out as the model, I think. I mean, I'm sure that there are, it's funny, I tried to look up controversies about it, and it's hilarious because, like, literally the controversies are that it's not more widespread, and and that it's teaches too much self-independence. Or,
oh no!
Right. I mean, that's the only arguments that I could find, which the second one doesn't even make sense. So, yeah.
No. Well, it makes sense if you're trying to churn out workers. But...
Right. If you're just trying to churn out mindless robots.
Yeah.
But, you know, the majority of us would benefit more from an understanding that we are part of a system and we have choices in that.
And you can be a whole loved person.
And be independent without having to, you can still be part of the community without having to be part of the group mind or the hive or the mob, as it were.
Right, hive mind.
Yeah. All right. Well, Emily, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed it. I knew I would.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, and we're going to definitely have to do this again. And I still say, you got a mic and you got an engineer husband. You get some free time, you should start your own pod.
Yeah.
Our sources for this episode are the History Chicks episode 143 on Maria Montessori. And I'm going to pause here for a second and say, History Chicks, it's very unlikely that you're listening to me. Your podcast is superior in every way. You do an amazing job. I love the work you do. But listening to this has reminded me why I had to stop listening to you on the reg. Please, God, stop referring to everybody's parents as mama and papa. It drives me insane. I can't handle it. I got through Maria because I needed to learn, and I knew you did good work and you had great sources, but I'm begging you, this is not Little House on the Prairie. Stop calling everybody's parents mama and papa. Other sources are the article, What is Montessori? From ncmps.org, the biography of Maria Montessori at montessori-ami.org, Education as a Help to Life from Education for Human Development by Mario Montessori Jr., Maria Montessori, Plato.stanford.edu, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and My Most Unforgettable Character by Mario Montessori at lmontessori150.org, which that last one, I believe, I loved that article. It was adorable. Again, just a heads up, the language is not, there's going to be a little bit of triggering language in there for the modern reader because some of the terminology is just not stuff that would be politically correct these days. But it was actually a Reader's Digest article that he did. It was adorable, really, to think about. I'm so glad that they got to have that relationship because you know how hard, as moms, like,
I can't imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I think she made the right choice. I think she made the only choice she could at the time, but she clearly loved her son very much, and he clearly adored her. Yeah. So I'm glad that they got to have that time together once he got a little bit older. If you would like to get in touch, leave some feedback, or just say hi, you can email or send me a voice message as an attachment to dinnerforher@gmail.com. You can visit my Facebook page where there will be a post for the next episode, and you can leave feedback in the comments section or send me a message through Facebook Messenger. I can also be found on TikTok, which I'm trying to get better at, y'all. I just really do not like having a camera pointed in my face while I talk to no one. And Instagram, same problem, at Dinner for Her. I'd really greatly appreciate it if you would leave a review, comment, like, or share on your podcast listening app of choice. It really helps, and every little bit makes a difference. I want to give a big thank you to Mark and Pirate Core Entertainment for all of his hard work and giving me this platform. Please visit the Pirate Core website and their Facebook page where you can find this podcast and many more, including my other project, What's On Tonight, with my best friend Becky, which also has its own Facebook page. What's On Tonight is a spoiler-filled podcast about TV, movies, and more. Right now they're beginning to cover the first season of Dexter Resurrection on Paramount Plus. I will not be covering Dexter because I just get real grossed out at watching serial killer shows. So I will be back in a few episodes to begin our coverage of Welcome to Derry coming out in the fall. I'm super stoked about that. But please check out the Dexter Resurrection if you are interested in that show, because Becky's going to have some really, really awesome guests, hosts for that. And then lastly, I want to say thank you to my sweet Emily. Getting to know Maria has been eye-opening and inspiring. There have been some real challenges to getting older, but one of the joys of my life has been watching from the sidelines as you overcame every hardship and setback life threw at you and used your phenomenal brain to carve out a better life, which is very Maria of you. Becoming a teacher makes so much sense for you with your direct dedication to kindness, decency, and endless intellectual curiosity. I believe Maria would be very proud of you, and I think you really embody this quote of hers that we will use to close out the show. Whoever touches the life of the child touches the most sensitive point of a whole, which has roots in the most distant past and climbs towards the infinite future. Thank you, everyone, and please come back next time to see what incredible, powerful woman will be joining us for dinner. Yay!
Yay! Hey, this is me, oh my God.
Let's have some dessert.
Yeah, I want some of that cake.